So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Morita. I'm a senior product manager here on the AWS accounts team. Sorry, we're jumping ahead a second there. Vivek, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Vivek Mishra. I'm a senior product manager in AWS Backup.
And today we'll explore how AWS Backup and Multi-party approval help you build resilient, secure, and recoverable data strategy, even when anything else fails. So we'll talk through a little bit of the business continuity and data protection, AWS Backup Logically Air-Gap Vault, its integration with multi-party approval, show data recovery in a cyber event scenario, and then do a demo, and then follow up with a quick Q&A. So I'll hand over to Vivek, and he'll start.
Yeah, sir. Thank you, guys. So to set the context, we are really here to talk about data protection. Both Alex and I are on different teams, but our real motive is how do we ensure there is data protection so that you have business continuity in your enterprises, in your businesses, and all that. But to understand what it really means, well, data protection is simply the process of safeguarding your data from corruption, from loss, or any other kind of compromise, and then have the ability to restore that data to a functional state so that you can have your recoveries happen, you can have your business continue. That's how we sort of define that. It's not just about protecting it, encrypting it, it's also about being able to restore it so that you can make use of that data. Now, why data protection is important? Because data is growing tremendously. It's actually exponentially growing from 2023 to 2028. It's almost going like more than 3 times. It's just like, as I see it, it's just like dirty laundry that nobody really wants to deal with it. But unlike dirty laundry, data is extremely valuable. In fact, I would even say that in the last few years, with Gen AI and machine learning use cases opening up, it has even become more valuable because now enterprises are actually diving deep. All that data that was vast, unused, sitting there doing nothing, actually enterprises are making use of that data. An example would be like RAG-based models, right? What they're really doing is exposing that data, giving you more context-rich answers so that you can unblock more use cases, do some innovation with that data, and make use of it. So if you look at it from a Uber perspective, it has value, then really it needs protection for your regulatory compliance, business continuity, DR, you think what. But designing this data protection solution has challenges, there are opportunities, and today we're going to talk about this launch, which will actually tell you ways of getting there. So one of the challenges for data protection is, of course, ransomware, and I think everybody out here knows. I'm not going to explain it, what it really means. It's been there for the last 15 years, challenging the industry to go build the right solution so that you can protect your enterprises, you can protect your data. It has become so mainstream, like it has even become commoditized that really the bad actors don't really have to do much. They can just pick up a tool and start getting in and trying to hack you and then demand ransomware. So from our perspective, what we think, it's certainly a big challenge for the industry, big challenge for enterprises who are trying to actually move forward, have business continuity, but they need solutions. They can't build this on their own. And if you think about it, how ransomware is progressing, the average downtime is now even longer than people keeping their New Year resolutions. And in actual data terms, probably more than 20 days. And 20 days could be sort of an eternity for a business because it can mean millions of dollars of loss just because the business is not up and running. So in totality, it's the loss of not only just ransomware that the enterprises might be having to pay, it's about loss of reputation, the loss of recovery, and all of that combined makes it a pretty hard challenge for enterprises. But it's not all gloomy. Yes, we understand it's a big challenge, but it is also something that the industry is very keenly focused on in providing the right solution so that customers can move on. And actually, customers have very high awareness of it. Like, it's testament to that is that you guys are here, you are interested in this topic, is the fact that the customers are aware and the industry itself is trying to find the right solutions. So we'll talk about what we're going to do with this with the launch today to address this problem. But to set the context again, let's start about with a AWS native service that tries to address the risks which is sort of there with ransomware attacks. So because it's important for you to understand what that service is, because the solution that we're going to talk about is very specific to that. So like I'm talking in somewhat of a broad general areas, but we're going to actually focus down to the exact solution that we are going to present today. So AWS Backup, that was released back in 2019, was launched to meet the customer need around data management so that they could automate, centralize all of that in one place. You can think of your scheduling your backups, how do you restore them, how do you do compliance, auditing, reporting, all of that as a native capability within AWS, and as something that you can do it at one place in a simple solution and don't have to do too much of heavy lifting to get there. It has capabilities around, like I said, backup and restore are its core capabilities. It has even ransomware-specific protection capabilities. You can think of how it does locking of your backup data. It has cross-account protection capabilities, KMS-based encryption, access policies. And then we launched this air-gapping solution last year. Plus, it has this restore testing capability so that you can actually go verify if your backups are clean, what's your RTO in terms of how you can get those backups up, and automate that in a single plan. So we can dive one more level deep, because this is the core functionality that we're going to talk about. So the AWS Backup as a service also has this logical air-gapping solution. What it really does is it provides the level of isolation that you may not usually get, and it provides accessibility. So it tries to solve two problems. Are my backups isolated enough? Yes, you can isolate them today with many capabilities, but it adds a few more layers. And then if I'm there facing an event, how do I get my backups out in a fast enough time so that my business is not disrupted? So it does that today, provides it as isolation through service-owned encryption. The backups themselves are in service accounts, so that if your account gets compromised, your backups are still there, lying there, so that you can recover them as you need them. And then from an accessibility perspective, there are a couple of features. One of them is the one we are announcing today, and then another is the RAM-based sharing, so that if you need to recover fast, you can share your air-gap poles with other accounts within your organization, so that you can directly start the restore process. You do not have to wait for copying all that data to that another pristine account and then start your restore. So basically, those are the two things that it tries to address. And yeah.
Thank you, Vivek. So as Vivek mentioned, a lot of the times with AWS Backup, we run into some typical traditional customer issues around traditional recovery. One is backups typically share and recover the same authentication boundaries, which helps risk a single point of failure. And when you look at from the account and organization perspective, you are losing the opportunity and the ability to recover those backups, which leads to slower times of RTO, leads to impacting business continuity. So with that, we're happy to introduce multi-party approval. So what is multi-party approval? Multi-party approval, excuse me for that. We heard from customers that they wanted a better way to protect critical AWS operations from being executed unilaterally. So we delivered multi-party approval. What it does is it helps guard and against these specific protected APIs. And what you do as a customer is you define approval teams made up of AWS human identities through AWS Identity Center. They will vote to approve or reject any of the actions that are put forth. This goes beyond traditional access controls by requiring multiple authorized individuals to approve an action before it's executed, even if that same IAM principal has the necessary permissions to do so. So what are some of the benefits that we talked about here? So first, you have an additional layer of security for your AWS organizations. We eliminate single points of failure for indecision making, reducing the risk of unauthorized or accidental changes. We also, with this, align with the principle of least privilege. Secondly, we centralize and standardize our approval workflows. So we're helping customers replace these disparate or non-AWS native approval workflows by bringing them internally, helping to enforce maybe internal policies and integrations with other AWS native services like Identity Center, like AWS organizations. And thirdly, we want to help and maintain clear audit trails. So we automatically log all of the approval and rejection actions that those individuals have taken. And secondly, we help facilitate compliance through through publishing to CloudTrail, so that way you can get access to all of those events.
So with that, so now that you understand what multi-party approval is, we have integrated logically air-gap vaults with this capability that was launched yesterday. And what this capability really does as an integration with air-gap vault is that we are leasing that trust of getting access to those backups to highly privileged individuals in your organization. So if you are able to form the right set of multi-approval teams, what you will get is an ability to get access to those backups at the time of an event, so that at the time of a crisis, you're not running around trying to figure out what permissions I need, who should I trust. The trust is actually set with that multi-approval team, who can then decide, as per the request that is started off, that I need to go access this data which is lying in a different account or even if in a different organization of my account, and then start my recovery process. Or even if you do not any longer trust that organization or for that account, you can actually transition your backups from that air-gap vault to another vault within this new organization or a new account that you have set up. And that's a new feature that we have launched yesterday.
So really quickly, I want to go into what does the multi-party approval integration architecture kind of look like before we dive into specifically what logically air-gapped integration would look like. So we're going to walk through 4 different personas today. The first 2 personas, I do want to call out ahead of time that these are one and done actions. Like you set them up ahead of time, and then after that, the approval team will not need to be re-associated to that same resource. So first, we have our multi-party approval facilitator or our multi-party approval admin. So what they'll do is they'll create that approval team within multi-party approval. They'll invite the IDC identities that they've identified and put those in the approval team, which will get sent out. After those approvers have accepted their invitation to that approval team, the AWS Backup admin would come in and associate that approval team at the resource level, saying, we want this approval team to protect this specific logically air-gap vault. The next two personas, this will happen this happens all the time. You don't need to set this up. This has already happened since multi-party approval has already been created and associated to the resource. So you have your recovery user. Your recovery user will initiate one of those protected operations. So if they try to restore one of the logically air-gap vaults or mount them to a new location, they'll invoke that protected action, which triggers the multi-party approval workflow. Lastly, you have your 4th persona, which is multi-party approvers. What they'll do is they'll log in to an IDC access portal, so a managed first-party application that we're providing. Using your IDC credentials, you'll log in and either approve or reject the action that's been called. If the vote passes, the action that was invoked will execute. If the vote fails, we'll have the opposite. The action will fail. I'm going to pass back over to Vivek.
Sure. So how will you go about incorporating a multi-party approval team into air-gap solution, and then how do you set it up? So there's a very simple reference architecture that I have here. So really what we would recommend any customer who's onboarding to this is to have 2 separate recovery orgs. And the reason for that is even if one of those recovery orgs is compromised, you still have access to the data. Quite simply, if your primary org is still intact, there is no problem. You can continue running your business. But if your primary org is compromised, then you have your recovery org, which can initiate those workflows so that you can get access to your backups. So what we would recommend as a reference architecture is that you set up your multi-party approval team in a separate recovery org. You can always do it in the primary one. You would get all the benefits of an account compromise, but in a situation where your organization itself is compromised, then you would have problems using that workflow. We are also trying to solve that problem, but that may come in some near future, not today. So you start by setting up your multi-party approval teams in a recovery org. You have your data in your primary org. All your workloads are there. Your air-gap solution has all the backups. And then you assign that approval team to your logically air-gap vault. So now they talk to each other. And once you do that assignment, there is no management account. There's no control anybody has after that point in time to break this association. Only the multi-party approval team has the authority to break this association. So if your account or your org is compromised, the vault will still honor that association. And then what will happen is, let's say at the time of incident, you can choose a recovery org. In this diagram, I've just shown a recovery org, which is the same, but you can actually choose a recovery org, create an association of that approval team with a recovery account, which is simply using Resource Access Manager, which is RAM, and share that MPA team with that account so that it's an authorized request. By authorized request is meaning no XYZ person can just come in and say, I need access to your air gap vault. No, that's not going to happen. Unless the management account is sharing that MPA team with the recovery account, there is no way the request can be initiated. So once that step is done, then the recovery account can go set a request. I need access to this air gap vault. And then the request will go to the MPA team, and MPA team, minimum number of approvers will need to approve it. And once that's done, the linkage will be created. And that linkage or that logical vault that we have defined is called a restore access backup vault in your recovery account, which you can simply, like we'll show you in the demo, but you can simply from that point onward start restoring your backups, or you can actually copy those backups to yet another different account within your organization. And the same model can work from the primary org. This situation is basically where your org is still intact, but your backup accounts and your workload accounts are actually compromised, and you really need to start doing it without trying to create yet another recovery org, which is basically an extension of the same workflow. So that was the sort of the, let's say, recommended reference architecture. But if you have to all put this together, how does air gap vault today try to solve? I think there were two problems that we're trying to solve. One is the problem we just talked about, which is how do you set up your recovery using multi-party approval teams? And then the second one is essentially the existing use case that we actually launched last year, is how do you actually go test for the data that is out there using restore testing capability that the platform already has. And that you can actually just use the lightweight RAM-based sharing model. So you can actually share your air gap vault with other accounts, your forensics account, using RAM-based sharing, and you can directly restore your backups using a restore testing plan and just do all your forensics, do all your cleanups, do all the reporting and audit compliance reporting so that you understand whether your data is clean, you understand what is your true RTO, and just go from there. You don't have to do, so one left side is slightly more heavy lifting because it's meant for a very specific use case where you're trying to recover from an event, whereas the right side is more about how do you do a day-to-day operation, knowing the health of your backups, trying to understand the true RTO of your backups, and so forth. OK. I think with that, we can move to the demo. Just to give you a sense so that you don't get overwhelmed, there are actually this 9 different steps, but there are really 3 different groups. In the first group, we'll try to show you how a multi-party approval team is created and shared so that it can be made use of. And then we'll show you how it actually is integrated with the AWS Backup. And then lastly, how do you actually go perform an actual recovery using this integration. Yeah, I think, yeah, next slide. And just start. This we won't need.
Awesome. So I'll walk through that first step, which is going to be creating a new multi-party approval team. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our normal AWS management console and click on AWS organizations. From here, you'll find the multi-party approval console. From this screen, you can see that this is how you navigate here, set up, and we recognize here that we need an active Identity Center instance. So from this, we're going to go ahead and just click on our second tab and show that we already have set up an IDC instance for the purposes of this demo. But just want to quickly show that from this perspective, like we have three users that we'll add to the approval team that we'll use in this demo. And people might be wondering, like, why are we using AWS Identity Center as a way to get approvals done, right? And the biggest rationale behind that is we wanted to be able to tie the approvals or rejections to an actual human identity. Right now, with like IAM rules, like it's a little bit trickier to track that down. So this is our first product, this is our first iteration that we're starting with. But we have been hearing already from customers that are like, hey, we want to really explore what else we can do outside of this. But like I said, to start, we're going to do Identity Center. So moving forward. So from here, we're going to go ahead and create our first approval team. So you see from below, the identity source that we showed in the second in that second tab has already been automatically attached since multi-party approval did recognize you already have an IDC instance there. So we're going to give this a team name. We're going to give it a description. And then from this perspective, we'll go ahead and add approvers, and we'll add those 3 different IDC users we showed from that tab. Again, tying back to that human identity portion, and you might be wondering, well, why are we showing 3? Right after this, we show how we're going to set the minimum threshold that we require for an approval to actually pass. Our rationale behind this is we wanted a minimum of 2 approvals to occur on any related action, because what we didn't want to happen is the person that's executing the action to also be part of the approval team and then can just approve themselves doing the action. It would defeat the purpose of what we're calling multi-party approval. So here you can see we set a minimum of 2 threshold out of 3, so 2 of these will have to approve, and then we've created the approval team, which is now moved into a pending state. In the pending state, that means emails have gone out to each one of those Identity Center users. They'll receive an email, a notification, where they'll take that email and log into their Identity Center credentials. So next, we're going to move into accepting an invitation in what we're calling the approval portal. Like I mentioned, we're not going to show here from the email perspective, but we're going to do it a secondary way. So what you can do is you can go to multi-party approval and look for the approval portal URL that's located within IDC. And here we're showing how the team is still in a pending state. So like I said, we're going to go here and we're going to move to our access portal URL. And in our first set of credentials, and we're going to go ahead and federate it right into the approval portal then from there. Now to orient you to what you'll see on the screen just now, so in the access portal what we have is we have 2 separate tabs. We have the operations tab and the approvals teams tab. You can see here under the approval teams invitations, we can accept or decline this operation from within inline. But if you click into the approval team itself, you can see some of the details that we entered when we created the approval team, like the name, the description. You can accept and decline the invitation from this viewpoint as well. Or like I said, we can go back and just press accept from here. And once we accept our invitation, that approver that has accepted the invitation, their status will change to successfully accepted. But again, the team will still be in a pending state because not all 3 have. For the purposes of this demo, we won't show you all 3 approvers doing the acceptance. So we've moved the team into an active status at this point. All approvers have accepted. In the event that an approver does not accept, you will actually have to add a new person, and the team will stay in a pending state. And everyone that has already accepted will have to go in and re-accept their invitation here. So we could see back in the access portal, when your team is entered at active status, if you were to log in, you can see here that here is your multi-party approval team that you're a part of. And the next thing we'll show real quick is how do you actually share a team with another account using Resource Access Manager. So again, I think when we've been talking through all these things around logically air gap vault and AWS backup, it's like, why did we want to make sure we could share teams to a different account? Or a different member account, and it's all about the availability perspective when it comes to backup, right? We want to be able to make teams highly available and the backups highly available as well, so that way there's always that chance of recovery even when everything goes wrong. So from our Resource Access Manager perspective, you see we're giving a name of the share, what kind of managed permissions come with the sharing. You get all our typical permission sets that are already created with multi-party approval. You can share it from an account-based perspective, an IAM identity-based perspective. We have not restricted any way of how you want to specifically share those teams. But from this perspective, obviously, we're going to share it with the account where the logically air gap vault lives. I will move forward. Obviously, with all Resource Access Manager sharing, you're going to make sure that everything looks correct, and then go ahead and create that resource share. And we get our successful. All right, and then I think from here? I'm going to hand over to Vivek.
So I think the last part to this is now the account to whom you share that the multi-party approval team also has to accept the invitation. It's a standard process of how RAM works. So the last step is that you accept that invitation, and then you're good to go. So these steps basically cover the part where the multi-party approval team is created, ready to go, shared with all the relevant accounts. And you can actually do this at any point in time, even later, when recovery accounts need to get access to it so that they can start the initiation. Now, one of the first things you will do when you come to the backup side, so this is yet another protection layer that we have, is you simply just can't use MPA team just because somebody has already set it up. To be able to use multi-party approval, the management account has to first enable it as a feature so that you first set things up correctly. You can set up SCP policies before anybody starts making use of. So let's say you've created 5 teams. You don't want every other account to start using it just because you shared it across your organization. You first have to enable it as a feature. And before you even enable it, you'll set some policies so that the right use of that team can be done. And I'll give you an example of how this can be done. Like one is short, small example of how it can be done with a service control policy. In the policy, you can basically restrict which team can be used by certain resources. In this case, it'll be air gap vault. And what is the action that it restricts? And the action it restricts is associating a multi-party approval team with air gap vault. So what you can do is that you can create a service control policy. And I just have a blurb here is because this functionality wasn't working a month back. So what I'm doing here is essentially I have that multi-party approval, which is the one which we just created. And then I'm saying that its effect is deny to all resources which exist. And now this is where you can essentially constrain who's able to use which teams, and so forth, so that you can manage it centrally in a more organized way rather than everybody trying to use everything, and it just becomes more difficult. So once you have done that, you have enabled it, you have set some policy, you can now associate your air gap vaults with this team. So the first step is actually creating a logically air gap vault, which is actually extremely simple. This just has a few fields. What you'll go is you will go into the console, you will go create a new air gap vault. You'll set its name, and then you'll add the guardrails, which is the maximum and minimum retention. Just for context, minimum and maximum retention periods are nothing but they just act like guardrails so that you don't get accidentally backups into an air gap vault when it should not be there. So if you have backups which are supposed to be living for 10 years, you don't want to get into an air gap vault because they'll be locked for 10 years. So you can set some guardrails that I don't want to accept any backup which is more than a year old, or has a retention which is more than a year old. So it basically makes your life a little bit easier that accidentally you're not trying to sort of shoot yourself in the foot. Okay, so once that's done, the air gap vault is created. You can now, one thing you need to do is you need to actually note the ARN of the vault. This is important at the time of recovery if your account or your organization is down and you want to initiate a recovery. And these ARNs are not complex. They're basically vault name added to a bunch of other things, and it's fairly easy. So what you do is once you have the air gap vault created, you simply assign the approval team to it. And the approval team was actually already shared in the past. So now this dropdown will show me that team which has been shared with me. If it is not shared, I cannot make use of it. If an access SCP policy denies me making use of it, then this operation will again fail. So once the team has been assigned, now that association cannot be broken unless the team itself chooses to break that association. Yeah. So I think once that's done, I think the number six step is just so that you guys have some sense of how backup works. This is how you'll make use of an air gap vault by creating a backup plan, making backups in your vault. And this is what, like I'm showing you the steps so that it all links with the steps which are coming later. Creation of a backup plan is fairly easy. You give it a name, you give it a frequency at which you're trying to do backups. You provide a primary backup vault where your first primary backups are going to go, and then air gap vault would be your destination or your copy destination where the copies of those backups will be isolated in service accounts. So this step basically shows you that I can set that up, I can give it a copy destination, and that destination is going to be an air gap vault where I have already assigned an MPA team. And once I do this, I can then set some resources that I want to go back up. So you can do this based on tags. You can pick any resource. I think in this case, I picked I picked up some S3 buckets, and then I had or I think EBS resources, and then I added a tag, which then allows, at that frequency, those backups to be made, firstly in the primary vault, and then as a copy in the air-gapped vault. And I don't know how many of you have tried this feature, but this is actually quite powerful because I can easily scale across my organization. There is nothing where I'm not mentioning any instances. I'm just providing a tag, and if your resources are tagged with that value, those backups will be made at that frequency which is set here. So yes, so that's my backup plan. Everything is set up. Of course, all the new backups will be made in due time when they run, and you can see that there are backups with recovery points which are already showing up that they have landed in my air-gapped vault. So now that all that is there, I'm going to now this is the part where the recovery workflow starts. I have those backups in an air-gapped vault. I cannot access that account. So I'm going to go to a totally different account, and I'm going to perform, or I'll make a request to my multi-party approval team that I need access to that vault and the backups inside it so that I can start a recovery. So in a recovery account, what I'll really do is I'll go into the vaults. Instead of creating any new kind of vault, there's a tab out there which says vaults accessible through multi-party approval. And this is where you create a request. And request basically needs just one ARN, which I told you that we need to remember that. So there's an ARN that I need to provide here. And then optionally, there's a vault name, so that because this logical construct that we have created, which is a restore access backup vault, in itself acts like a vault. So you can run all your APIs about describe vault, list recovery points inside that vault. So it actually is quite powerful, is because it's not just one, it just doesn't do one thing. It actually behaves like a vault. So I've sent that request, and now what will happen is, in next step, all the approvers will get this same request in their email accounts, where they will get the context of who's asking and why are they asking, because I added a comment there, and then they can go into the approval portal, and then they can start approving this request. So right now, the access is pending request is because at least 2 out of those 3 approvers need to approve the request. So now this is the email that I was talking about. So each of the approvers are going to get this email. They can go from here, and this will take them to the access portal where they will make this update of, they can either deny it also. So if 2 approvers say, no, I don't want to accept it, then this request will fail. That's the case where if somebody has somehow done more, like even though it's very hard because RAM-based sharing controls that, not any random account can make this request. But let's say there was yet another attack and somebody was trying to do it, the multi-party approval team is the final authority to approve that request. Okay, so now you see in the approval portal, as an approver, I can see what this request is all about, and then I can simply go approve this. And this approval will still stay there. So people really have to compromise more than one approver to even break the system. So now you can understand there is layer after layer after layer that we're adding to this, that it now becomes like it's almost next to impossible that somebody can sort of compromise not only the systems which are out there, but actually physically people out there, which in a multi-party approval system is actually a very hard way to do it. So now my second account, my second approver is going to come in and they're going to approve it. And as soon as 2 of them have done, this request will be completed and they can then start the recovery process.
And just to point out, like in case people are wondering, does it always have to be 2? Can it be 3? Can it be 4? Yes, the answer is yes. You can make a team up to 20 people and have the approvers needed from 2 all the way to 20. I don't necessarily recommend that you do 20 approvals for 20 approvers, but if that is what your organization believes you need, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so now it's actually into that restore access backup vault. The vault status is active, and I can actually see those recovery points which are actually existing in a different account in a different logically air-gapped vault. And now what I'll do is essentially the last step, which is either I can restore, just directly go to the console, or I can actually copy it to a different account because I have access to all of those. I, of course, cannot go and delete. It's a read access. I cannot delete actually backups which exist that. Even though I think the UI is not going to, yeah, so it shows you restore and copy. The edit part is not there. It's just test environment so you could see it. And yeah, I'm just providing a role so that I can do the restore process from there. I think that pretty much covers the 3 big areas that we wanted to show here, which basically tells you that these are the things that is required. This is how you go perform a recovery when an event happens. Yeah, I think that's,
yeah, I'm gonna say
we're open to
you.
questions if folks have it here.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. If you have any other questions, please see me or Vivek afterwards. We're happy to answer anything for you. Thank you again.